Oh no, it's me, Thorin. I've been transformed into a bird in an obvious allusion to Ovid's Metamorphoses. Of course, if I'd been looking to transfer my skin in CSGO, then CS.MONEY would have been the place for me, as it's faster and safer than trading with a person, and trade hold is not a problem. Bye. Now at the end of this video, stay tuned if you want a chance to win a ticket to actually come to this event. It obviously won't be for tomorrow's games, but later in the tournament and actually see the matches live from the Mercedes-Benz Arena. I'll give the giveaway at the end of this video. We've reached the playoffs of the Starladder Berlin Major. Now, anyone who's been following the tournament so far and been seeing how I'm doing the pick'ems, like in each of the two pick'em phases, I had, I think, 6 out of 9, or yeah, I think it was 6 out of 9 overall, maybe 5 out of 9 for one. I think 6 out of 9 overall from what I remember. It's always the 3 zeros I got wrong. So for this phase, what I'm going to do differently is this is going to be a preview of the 4 quarterfinals, and I'm going to go in order of how they're actually played. But then I'm also going to shadow box the rest of the tournament and take the teams that I say win the quarterfinals, put them in the semi-finals, tell you who wins those matches, then tell you who wins the final, because otherwise how else can you do your pick and bracket? And I'll do my pick and bracket myself as we go along, and you'll see who I lock in. Now, to be fair, if I see these games and I'm on the desk and the semi-final, for example, has a different set of teams in, obviously I'll do different analysis, and it's possible I even change my pick. But I have actually put a lot of time into running all the maps, all the picks, thinking very deeply about how the matchups might work out, and so I'm actually willing to put my head on the line on this one and pick some of these, even though I can't really know who's actually going to play in some of the matches yet. One of the things I think actually has been unusual about this tournament that actually makes it, in theory, one of the hardest brackets to ever predict is if you want to go with current form coming into the playoffs, you actually have to start looking at teams like ENCE, Vitality, NRG. These are the big favourites actually in terms of raw form in the previous phase of the tournament. If you want to look at historical components, having players who've been there before, stylistic elements, decent map pool over the last few months, then you're actually looking at Team Liquid, Australis, Navi. These are teams with the pedigree, teams that have done it before. Maybe even throw in ENCE vaguely over to there as well, even though they've had not so good time recently, right? Vitality, that's obviously another team. Still kind of fits both categories, so really tough to know who wins. Now, I will say, I think it's very unlikely that a Vanguard or Renegades wins the whole tournament. Now, the bracket that they're on, not impossible they can make the final, I just wouldn't pick it personally. Renegades better chance than a Vanguard. But you look at the overall bracket, the bottom half, which is the Australis, Team Liquid, the Navi and RG one, is super, super stacked. I feel as though the winner almost surely comes out of there. But listen, there's a world in which a team like Vitality is good enough to win anyway. I think they just need the right opponent to come out the bottom side of the bracket, because I think 2 or 3 of the teams out there probably would be able to beat them rather. So ENCE versus Renegades is the first matchup of the quarterfinals. Quite frankly, I actually think on paper it's one of the most interesting matchups, because obviously ENCE in terms of the world rankings has been way ahead of the likes of Renegades. They've even won a tournament, one of those Blast events. Renegades haven't particularly come that close to winning a tournament. Maybe the closest was Star Series Season 7, where they lost to Navi in the semis, but we don't know what would happen if they'd gone to the final, because they're not a team that performed under the big lights, as it were. In fact, the last major, they were in the round of 8. They were on paper supposed to beat MIBR, it was a busted lineup. And they managed to lose that matchup, and they gave all the same excuses. We haven't been there before, we made weird choices, maybe we vetoed wrong. So coming into this matchup, on paper, ENCE is heavily favoured. But these two teams match up pretty closely. The map pools are pretty interesting. Some of the vetoes, etc., are pretty straightforward. And a lot of it, I think, comes down just to individual performance in this matchup. I don't think stylistically there's that big a difference. I think both have good team play, both have pretty solid tactics, both know how to veto in the map pool, both have key weaknesses in the map pool, both have key strengths in the map pool. So for me, let's just start with the individual angle before we get into the whole maps and the breakdown. So for ENCE, Alu at the moment has been mega overperforming. Like, if he can continue, this will be one of the most legendary runs ever. I would say against Renegades, he can probably do some of it. I don't think for the playoffs it continues, so I expect him to level off a little bit. I think ENCE has actually got way more firepower out of their team than you'd expect in the new Legends stage, the previous phase of the tournament. Sergey looks very strong, which, listen, he's the best player in the team. He can be a very, very good player. Obviously, he has tournaments where he's a bit off. So far, all looking great. He's a guy you want to carry. He didn't do it in the playoffs of the last major, despite the fact they went to the final, but he's still clearly a very good player. Alexi B, I think, overperformed. The guy who's, in theory, going to be cut as in-game leader after this tournament. I think he's really been overperforming, but then again, he's also got great motivation too. We don't really know what the in-game leadership scenario is in the team right now, so has he been freed up to frag a bit more? That would be very curious, because maybe it gives them a little bit more firepower. Generally, I think the firepower events in the previous phase means they should batter Renegades. But if I look at ENCE day to day, and over the last 6 months, they should level back down, and they should only, I think, maybe have a slight firepower edge over Renegades. I think Renegades actually on the bottom end of the equation, not so bad. Then again, Renegades themselves have had a very weird tournament, because JKS, their best player for my money, hasn't really heated up. Like, he hasn't been in the form he has if you go back a few months, a few tournaments back when he was one of the best players in the world. Their best player so far has been Jacob, and actually, these are kind of routine numbers for Jacob. Like, in big tournaments, this is actually kind of like where you expect him to be at, and he can be one of the better players, but he hasn't been at the level of Alu and Sergey. Then you have Kratos Faction, who seems to have gotten past all the issues of the summer and the visa things. He's in better form. He's never going to be a superstar or but he's a solid player, and he fixed into the team. The interesting one within the Renegades for me is Liaz, because he is overperforming like crazy. Even worse than Alexi B and Alu, because in context where they are is not that insane. Liaz's performance, like the numbers just do not make sense. So I can't buy that continues on. If it does, then Renegades is a whole new kettle of fish, and maybe they can become a contender in the world. I think he probably levels off, and he just had a great performance in the previous round. So again, fragging-wise, I think there's similarities here. I'd maybe put the top end of the fragging over on the end side. I'd say man for man. Renegades maybe evens it out a little bit. So then we come down to the map pools, and we come down to the vetoes, right? So if we go look at this, there's a lot we can talk about here. So Ents is a team who, they're monsters on train. They obviously had a streak on it way back. They don't get to play it as much for obvious reasons. Not many people in the scene like train, so you're only going to get to play other good train teams on it. But they're able to beat the likes of the Renegades when they play it. They're very good on Nuke. After that, you're already starting to fall off. Like, Overpass is good. If you look at who they lost, it's pretty good, actually. It's probably underrated map in terms of the win rate. Dust 2, they actually have an okay win rate on Dust 2 at the moment. But, I listen, they beat Vitality. Vitality's a great Dust 2 team. Some of that, I think, was a little bit fluky. I think some of that's just playing off individual ability and overperformance. Inferno's always been a little bit ropey. Even so, the teams that are losing to, not that bad. Mirage is not very good at the moment for them, and they don't play Vertigo. You go on the Renegades side, like, Inferno's one of their best maps at the moment. They've beaten G2 on it. They lost to Ents, so not a great sign for this series. Vertigo, actually, they've been putting a lot of work in. They've got wins over FaZe and G2, who play the map. Even their losses, Team Liquid, Vanguard, well, Team Liquid play the map, and these are close losses. So actually, Vertigo is a key pick for Renegades here, something they'd like to be able to use, except they won't be using it in this series because of the permaban of Renegades. Mirage is a map that Renegades plays a lot. They've had a lot of close losses. They're on a couple of game winning streak. You look at some of the teams they've lost to, it's not so unforgivable. It's not a decent enough map. They definitely play train and always have. One of their losses is to Ents, who's one of the best train teams. They lost to FaZe, who definitely plays train a decent amount. They won over Dream Eaters, doesn't really mean much. Nuke, they've lost the last couple. That's a negative for them, obviously, especially since it's a strength for Ents. Dust 2, they're 0-4 their last 4. You look at the teams they've lost to, though, to be fair, we're talking NRG twice, G2 and Vitality. These are all Dust 2 teams. So actually, again, in the same way as the Dust 2, I actually think for Ents is maybe a little overvalued. I think the Dust 2 for Renegades is a little undervalued. And then the map that the Renegades do not play is, of course, Overpass, which has primarily always been one of the strengths of Ents. So the reason why these teams match up as well is because when you go to the map pool, there's so many obvious directions for them to go. So if you go over on the side of Ents, I'm going to assume higher seed bans first, because to this day, no one ever explains how the fucking system works. So obviously that could be off. But luckily in this series, it doesn't matter who bans first, because Ents has banned Vertigo the last 10 times they have had a chance to do a first ban in a series. So they will ban Vertigo. As I said, a secret sleeper pick for the Renegades. Unfortunately, Renegades won't get to use it in this series, but then again, they forced the ban that I think would come anyway, quite frankly. So over on the side of Renegades, you are looking at another obvious one, which is a ban of Overpass. Because you know what? The last 9 times the Renegades have had a chance to do a first ban in a best of 3 series, they have banned Overpass. And what do you know, as I said, probably an underrated map for Ents if you just look at the raw win rate of they've won 2 out of their last 4. So after we've got the bans out of the way, now is where it gets a little bit interesting. Because where does Ents go for their pick? Right, history says this isn't that difficult. Because against everyone, basically, Ents tries to pick train. They picked it 5 out of the last 10 times. And the other 5 times they didn't pick it, it was banned away by someone else. So you can see, if train's available, they're going to pick it. Now, it doesn't matter that actually Renegades is not a bad train team at all. This is a map that if you're Ents, you're just so good on it, it feels like, of course, you pick this one. The only other option is you pick Nuke and try and go into what is a perceived weakness of the Renegades. I don't mind that as an angle at all. I just think, personally, Ents will say, train's our map, we're picking train. And I've also seen Renegades have close losses on train, but sometimes look a little bit ropey at certain times, particularly on the T side. So I'll say they pick train there. I actually think that Ents wins this map. Then we go to Renegade's side. Okay, so the interesting thing here is, the most picked map for the Renegades, 6 of the last 9 times, is Mirage. I think logically, if you're going against Ents, it's not really like that great a map for Ents. I mean, they've lost the last 2 on it. The other option for Renegades, probably Inferno. I don't really know. I've always felt like that was more of a touch and go, especially since the Org left for the Ents guys. Like, listen, they have a decent enough win rate on it. I'll just look that up. The win rate on Inferno is 2-2. I think personally at this point in time, I think it's actually the right pick to go for the Mirage one. If you're the guys from the Renegades, there's no Vertigo left in the pool. And actually, you know what? I think actually Renegades would win this if they play. Listen, there's certainly a fragging chance for the Ents guys, but I think Renegades gets this one. I think this has potentially be a great 3-map series. Second round rotation bans. I think if it's left, whichever's left of Inferno or Mirage, logically Ents should ban. So if it's Inferno at this point in time, then Ents bans Inferno. Then for the guys from Renegades, now this depends on whether or not Ents decided to do a cheeky little pick of Nuke. Because if Nuke was what Ents picked, then Renegades almost certainly bans, I think, Dust 2 and then leaves Train. Now, if Train was what Ents picked, then I think that this is where Renegades bans Nuke and we end up with Dust 2 as the decider. So I think we probably get Dust 2 as the decider personally. I think between the maps that they play, I think that's just the one that they actually, like, I think the guys from Ents are a little bit cocky on that map, actually, and always have been, and think they're good on it. So I think we get to Dust 2, I think we're going to get to a decider. And I'm going to say, actually, I think Ents wins it overall. Like, something about the Renegades, they always let me down when it's the big time. I feel as though in big pressure moments, they actually don't perform to their best. I think Ents actually is underratedly good in pressure moments. And I think on this map, overall, they'll have more grit, they'll have more firepower slightly. And I think in the big moment, if they get to this third map, they win overall. So I'm taking Ents to win this first series 2-1. So the Vitality versus Avangar series is a very curious one because obviously these are not teams, first of all, that play each other particularly. They obviously come from completely different regions, Europe and then CIS region. Vitality's been the second best team in the world in the rankings in terms of top tournaments that they made it deep in. Avangar were relative nobodies. Like, they've always been a team that's like at the sub level, the tier 2 they farm up in the online qualifiers. Typically they haven't done that much in the big tier 1 tournaments. They don't often even play in them. So individually, I think it's quite interesting actually, because man for man, I might actually give a slight edge to Avangar man for man. But in terms of superstar fragging, there's nobody on Avangar comes close to Ziwu. So if you want to talk about Vitality, Ziwu, interestingly at this major, has not been in super duper god tier form, similar to Simple, but they're such insane players. He's still a very good player and still a fucking going to be the best player in the server in this series almost certainly. Apex has been good. He's done what you'd expect of him basically. MBK has been pretty poor. Alex has been good. And RPK just does what RPK does, not a whole lot, quite frankly. On the Avangar side, you want to see James, the in-game leader in the AWPer, be a big fragger, right? He's been pretty underwhelming this tournament so far. That's a big concern coming in this series, where head-to-head the other AWPer he's playing against is way more aggressive, much better AWPer, and quite frankly will force him into those saves, which I think is part of the reason why, even though sometimes they can grind out the big close wins in big games, I think it's also why they lose a lot of games, 14-16, 13-16, etc. They don't take some of the chances you have to, especially if you're the underdog. Quicker has not been as good as I'd expect, quite frankly. He's obviously the equivalent to Apex. I don't think he's been delivering at this tournament. He's someone I actually thought maybe Navi would look at. Then you got to look, Buster's been pretty solid. I think he's had a good enough tournament. Adren has been awful. He's the equivalent of RPK in this sense, but probably even worse. Maybe he brings outside of the game stuff, I don't know, but there's not a whole lot going on beyond that, quite frankly. And the Sanji guy is just a wash. Who gives a fuck? I mean, MBK is not playing well either, so I don't think actually, basically, this is on Ziwu. Ziwu can just absolutely dominate this series and make Avangar have no chance whatsoever. If Ziwu doesn't play well, then it's not actually that big a deal in terms of the fragging differential. Then you go and look at the maps. Okay, so Vitality have a really good win rate on Dust 2 and Mirage. But here's the interesting thing. The win rate's not insane in terms of, like, I shouldn't have said win rate. I said they've got a lot of good wins on Dust 2 rather. The problem is they're 10 out of their last 16 on that map. That's a lot of losses, right? They've lost 3 of their last 5. You might think, fucking hell, that's a lot of losses. That's just Dust 2. Like, go find me the teams with the God tier records on Dust 2. Even Team Liquid, etc., who's God tier on that map in terms of win rate, even they lose the odd one in weird fashion. So that's just the nature of Dust 2. It's always going to be a strong map. For me, stylistically, I think it's the best map for the Vitality guys. Interestingly, Vitality has a 10-1 record over the last 11 maps of Mirage they've played, and they've won the last 6 in a row. There are a lot of fucking bombs in there. So I don't buy that personally. And their loss was to Team Liquid. So I think even though some of those teams, like some of them aren't that good, some of them are middling, I got to say that's kind of like it's a padded stat. They're not as good on that as they are. I personally think their second round map is still Overpass. They've won 9 of their last 14. They've lost 4 of their last 6, which has been very key. But then again, you go and look, some of those losses are to Team Liquid, Heroic, teams that play the map. And listen, they've beaten the likes of Ents, who are good on the map. They've beaten Australis, who traditionally played the map, even though they're not as good on it nowadays. Still a very strong map. The problem for the guys from Vitality is their map pool really falls away heavily after those first 3. Inferno, they're 7-6 on in their last, whatever that would be, 13. And they've won their last 3. Brilliant. But some of those are like North, etc. These aren't the best teams in the world. Now, to be fair, some of the Inferno losses are Team Liquid, Australis. Like, these are some of the best teams on Inferno. So I'll say that's a solid middling map, but you're already starting to see the rest of the map pool falls away. So Nuke, the guys from Vitality are 4-4 on. They've lost their last 3. 2 of those were to Ents, to be fair, who is a Nuke team, and Heroic certainly plays the map. They've also had some wins over teams that play Nuke, like North. They've lost to Furia. So Nuke isn't terrible. It's certainly okay in the middle, but these are not the strengths that you're going to see from some of the other tournament favourites when we go to them. Trains 1-1 when they've had to play it. They try not to, quite frankly. They played Vertigo once. They beat Mouse on it. Kind of shocking, but then supposedly they kind of learned on it from the likes of Mouse and other teams in the tournament. So that's just there if they have to. I don't think generally it's something that's going to come into play too much in this playoffs overall. On the side of a Vanguard, their best map at the moment in win rate is Overpass. Won the last 2 on it. You look at some of the teams they beat there. Yeah, some not bad teams there. I think stylistically, for me, their best map might actually be Overpass. They won their last 2. They beat Team Liquid in overtime at this tournament. They beat G2 on it. They lost to Ents. Okay, that's pretty solid. I actually think stylistically, like I say, that's a very good map for them to go into, even though it's a very good map for Vitality. Dust 2's been a solid enough map for them. Losing to the NRG and G2's not bad. They're teams that will absolutely play that map and go into it. Vertigo, they've played a bit. I don't think it was that convincing, even though they beat Renegades. Renegades, I know people think it's a questionable pick. I think that wasn't such a legit result from a Vanguard. Mirage, they've lost the last 2. Train, they've lost, and they don't play Nuke. So if we go into the ban phase for this one, Vitality, if they stick to their normal trend, 13 out of the last 16 times they ban Train. But there's an option here. It's not as though Train's the best map for a Vanguard, even though I think stylistically they do play it. I personally wouldn't necessarily risk this. This is an option. The other option, if you're the guys from Vitality, is just ban Inferno, because it's the best map for a Vanguard. It's kind of a middling map for you. I mean, what are they going to pick into you at that point in time? I'm not that worried personally. So I think personally they'll just stick with the Train ban. And as a result, I think that the ban for a Vanguard's pretty obvious. The last 5 times they've had a chance, they've banned out Nuke first. So you look at the guys from Vitality, they certainly can play it. Would they pick it into you? Let's have a quick look at that, shall we? They've picked it 3 times out of the last 8. Not out of the last 8. They've picked it 3 times out of... how many is that? Something like 3 times out of the last 16 or 17. So they will sometimes pick it if they think the opponent's weak on it. So I don't think that's necessarily a terrible one to go ahead and say, let's chuck that out there. If you are the guys from a Vanguard, just get it out of the equation. You don't play it anyway. Which means if we've got Train and Nuke out of the equation, I personally think Vitality just goes ahead and picks Dust 2. You've got so many wins on it. You picked it 7 out of the last 8 times you could. It's clearly a strength of yours. In theory, on paper, you should have a fragging edge over a Vanguard. I think Dust 2 doesn't really suit their style at all. That slow grind out style, I don't think that works very well. And I definitely don't think James' style works that well on that map. So I'd be loving this. And I think if they do, Vitality wins that map. A Vanguard, I think logically, assuming it wasn't banned, picks either Inferno or Mirage. Now, here's how it goes. Inferno, because it's just the map they picked the most, like 3 out of the last 5 times. Mirage, though, and this is the interesting thing, there's been a couple of times where they had to pick Inferno because Mirage was just banned out of the equation. So clearly they like both maps, so don't be thrown off by that. The Mirage one's definitely a possibility. The problem is, even though, as I said, I think it's a little bit padded, the win rate for the guys from Vitality and Mirage is very, very, very good. And Ziwu's a monster on that map. So I'd way rather get him to Inferno, neutralise that AWP a little bit and put that pressure on fucking Apex to entry. That's what I want to do on that particular map. And then isolate people like RPK if I get the chance to. So in this world, I think if I'm the guys from a Vanguard, that's a much better map to play. You can control that map on both sides a lot more as an in-game leader. If you're Jame, it's not going to suit your AWP that much, but I'd rather take away Ziwu's AWP and take away your own than have to go head-to-head AWP versus AWP as you would if you're going to play on Mirage. So I think if you do that, I'm sorry to tell you, Vitality still probably wins. Like, they should basically win this series 2-0. But anyway, we keep going in the veto. I think after that, Vitality bans Vertigo. It's a map that they occasionally ban if they need to. It's just a map that they haven't played very much. I know they have played it recently, but then again, so has a Vanguard. So why bother playing it as a decider in a best of 3 for your potential major chances, right? So I think logically, Vitality bans Vertigo. I think a Vanguard has a choice between Mirage and Overpass. They ban Mirage. Great map win record for the other ones, not their best map anyway. And you get Overpass as a decider, which would be an interesting map. Certainly one of the best maps for the Vanguard. Also a strong map for the guys from Vitality, although I said Vitality's lost 4 of the last 6 on it. Nonetheless, they're a better team. They've got better players overall. I think Vitality would win that as well. I actually think Vitality would win any map they play of those 3 that I've suggested. So I think Vitality wins the series 2-0. Even if it goes to the third one, they win 2-1. Our third series, because the bracket's slightly out of order, because for obvious reasons they put Team Liquid Australis in the primetime slot, is NRG versus Navi. Now this is really a tale of 2 teams, because NRG made the big gamble change to get Stanislaw, who's this big fragging in-game leader in theory, and hopefully can retain some of the strengths they had when they had DAPS, as well. A pretty solid team that could finish top 4, but they didn't go deeper. They've already beaten Team Liquid in a best of 3, pretty good news. They've beaten Australis a couple of times in best of 3s. You go over to the Navi side. Navi's a team that were always in the same position anyway, but slightly higher up. They have Simple, potentially the best player in the world. I don't think he's played enough maps recently, but then again, see who hasn't won winning tournaments either, so will he always do it in finals? They haven't been in many finals, right? So I think interestingly, on the Navi side, they're more in a black box. You've only seen them at this tournament in Cologne with Boomich. Obviously, there's the potential that can improve them. You even see some of the fragging in this tournament looks better than it did before. These 2 teams, interestingly, like in terms of individual form, Navi's right up there in the tournament. In terms of individual form and overall team form, NRG's look like one of the best teams in the tournament, arguably the best team in the tournament. So I think at the moment you've got like current heat, NRG, versus like the historical qualities, things that you think is more reliable, that you've seen more of in Navi, even though you haven't seen them much recently. So all in all, interesting matchup overall. Then you look at the map. Let's go player by player, shall we? So the guy who's been the stand-up for NRG in terms of overall impact is obviously Stanislaw. He's called some great games, they've won some epic games, and he's had, I think, a big-time overperformance for Tier 1. Like, he's occasionally had these performances, but on either lesser teams or long ago or one tournament out of a lot. So I think he cools off a bit, especially against a team like Navi. Cirque has been overperforming big time, but he is a player with big potential. Just he hasn't done it at the Tier 1 tournaments against the Tier 1 teams generally, but he was a fucking monster against Australis. Breezy's been pretty standard. Tarek's been pretty standard. Ethan's been pretty meh, but I always find him the most underwhelming player of that lineup anyway. I think the thing with this team is they have massive potential in terms of fragging, and they can certainly have like 3 or 4 people fragging really well, but they never get all that you expect out of the names. They're not ever going to do like Australis 2018, Team Liquid 2019, at least thus far. Now, potentially, maybe NRG 2020 is when we see it unleashed, and that would be a very sexy premise, right? Maybe not now, though. Navi side of the equation, you have to start with Simple, right? He hasn't actually been, as I said in the Zero part, he hasn't been at his god tier fragging level, but he's Simple, so he still has very good stats. Interestingly enough, he has a lot less deaths than he did in the past. I know this whole thing where he changed mouse, supposedly it's because the click is like even faster than the other one. Still a very, very strong player. I expect him to come back around and get back up to the level and be potentially the best player in the tournament. Electronic has overall been overperforming, but again, he's someone who can be streaky and can have an amazing high, and he can certainly be like a top 5 player in the world. Flamey's been stronger than usual. To be fair, he's always stronger at majors, bizarrely. I usually expect that to drop off, though. Boomich, quite frankly, the whole time he's been there has been pretty so-so. Like, his main selling point is he's not Edward. Zeus has been better than usual, but even then, nothing nuts, guys. And I think that will probably fall away. He's a pretty terrible individual player. So, in terms of the overall fragging level, I would give a slight edge in terms of man for man to NRG, but I would say in terms of overall firepower, the big dogs, because I don't think the NRG players will be as good in the playoffs, I think I give the slight edge to Navi, because I could see Electronic still being sick. I could see Flamey giving me one map where he has 26 kills and he's an absolute fucking monster, and that could change the whole series. Then you go into the map pools. So NRG has a whole bunch of maps they've got really nice win rates on. Train, they're 5-1 on. They've won 5 in a row. They've beaten a whole bunch of teams that play that map. Dust 2, they're 4-1 on. They've won the last 4. Some of those teams play that map. Team Liquid, for example. The loss was to Vitality, use the Dust 2 map. Inferno, they're 4-1 on. They've won the last 4. Some bombs in there. That one's not really as legit, quite frankly. Obviously, that's a map that Cirque doesn't get his AWP going as much. Nuke, that's very middling on that. But they're going to win over Australis. That was amazing. So it's got to be a confidence builder. Mirage is all right. You look at some of the teams they're playing, solid enough. Overpass, a little bit underwhelming in terms of win rate. They've won one of the last 3. One of the losses was the Dream Eaters in overtime, which no one knows how to match up against that team. It's a team they've never played before. And then they lost to Team Liquid, who was probably the best Overpass team in the world. They don't play Vertigo. You go to the Navi side. Interestingly, this map pool's changed around from where you think of the old Navi. So the best map on paper at the moment is Inferno. Now, I've made a lot of fun of Zeus over the last, let's say, year for picking Inferno at times when the win rate was terrible and stylistically they didn't look good. At the moment, they look pretty solid on that map. True, with some of their players fragging who don't normally. But you look at the teams they've beaten there. Yeah, some pretty alright teams. No big hitters, to be fair. So that might be a little bit padded. Overpass is always going to be a good Navi map. One of the signatures. But they've lost 2 of their last 3. To be fair, one of those was Team Liquid, the best Overpass team. One of them was G2 in overtime. Pretty solid Overpass team. And they've obviously beaten Team Liquid on that map when they were at ESL 1 Cologne. So it's always going to be a strength of theirs. Nuke is actually surprisingly pretty decent. They obviously beat Crazy on that, who didn't really turn up, to be fair. It's not really a great map for them. They lost to Mouse Sports. They certainly play the map. And they beat Furia, who in theory, I'm not going to say it's one of the best Nuke teams, but that is one of the best maps for Furia. Mirage is still so-so. They've won 2 of the last 3 all the same, but they lost that game to Crazy when they just tried to frag out. That's a little bit of a question mark. One of the losses was to Team Liquid. Obviously, that's a team that has, I think they have like a 13-game winning streak on Mirage, so there's certainly no bombs themselves. Train's still there if they want it, but they've only played Mouse on it recently, who is a Train team. I think that's a map that they can potentially later on in the playoffs flex into if they indeed win this series. Dust 2, they've lost the last 3. 2 of them were to Team Liquid in overtime, though. So to be fair, that is the best Dust 2 team on paper. So I don't really blame you as much. I think that's one where they can certainly play. So interesting, Navi has a lot of maps they can play, and then they do not play the same map as NRG. It's Vertigo. So now when we come to the ban phase, that's the interesting part, right? Because history, now I'm assuming the higher seed does it again. So interestingly, I think I might have fucked this up actually. In theory, I think that should make Navi the higher seed, but I did it that NRG was, because I'm not sure how that works in terms of the EDO aspect. So I put NRG ban first. So I say that NRG bans Inferno, because since Navi bans Vertigo, and Navi themselves, when they played some team earlier, they actually, I think it was NIP, they didn't ban it, so that the other team banned. So I think actually in this world, I think that NRG goes, Navi's definitely going to ban Vertigo. So if we ban first, I think actually they're the ones who say, fuck it, get Inferno out of there, I think is what NRG says. It's logically a very good map overall on the side of Navi. It's a map that you've got wins on if you're NRG, but they're not really very legit at the moment. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want to put my map with a player like Cirque. I don't want to put him on Inferno as my pick in a series. So I think you get rid of Inferno. I think Navi then goes for the Vertigo ban. If not, another option is to ban Dust 2. They haven't been good on it. The guys from NRG have. But I think they'd probably ban Vertigo and be a bit boring. Then I think NRG, the logical pick here if it's open is Train. They looked really, really good on it against Australis. They've got a whole bunch of wins on it against teams that seem solid enough. I think if you look at it, the way Navi play, they certainly have a chance to frag out on this. They've always been a solid team on this map. I actually think right now, with the strengths of the different teams, with that opening up a player like Cirque, with Stanislaus' great game, he's always had a good T-side on that map. I think actually I'd take NRG to win this one. I would give them this particular map. I then think logically that Navi has 2 picks. They either pick Overpass. Listen, this is a map they absolutely love to pick. Like you go back and you look here, it's one that just historically they like to pick. Another map they actually historically have been picking recently is Dust 2, even though they've lost every one of those motherfuckers. And then they picked a lot of Inferno as well. Well, Inferno, I think, is going to be banned by NRG, so that's gone already. That's another reason why I think the NRG guys should ban it, because it's probably going to be the pick of the Navi guys. And I would say instead you pick Overpass. Or Mirage. That's the other option. It's always been a map you somewhat liked. I wouldn't like the way it's gone recently on it, quite frankly. I know Overpass has, like I said, they lost 2 of the last 3, but you look at it in context, it's not as bad. I actually would say Navi should win this one. It's one that NRG will have a shot at, but I would say overall Navi probably edged this one. Then you go to the second ban rotation. I think NRG, if it's available at this point in time, bans Mirage. I think Navi has a choice out of Dust 2 and Nuke. Logically, they should ban Dust 2 and they should play Nuke. I know they've been picking it, so you might think that's the one they like to play. I could see a world in which they say that as well. But I think with both teams' recent form on Nuke in the very, very recent phase, I think you should both be willing to play it for a potential decider. And this is what's interesting. Navi has the potential to frag out. They have Simple. I actually have a hard time not picking Simple to win in more series because he can do things nobody else can. They have a player like Electronic. I'm going to actually say maybe nerves don't get NRG. I think they can do it this time. I think it's not enough of a sample size to really study them. I know Navi hasn't got a whole lot. I think they're a bit more up and down. I'll actually say if this comes to a decider, I think NRG will win Nuke, and NRG wins this series 2-1. The sexiest matchup of the quarterfinals is undoubtedly Team Liquid versus Australis. So we have the team of 2018 versus the team of 2019. The team who had an era in 2018, the team who has an era in 2019. But Team Liquid doesn't have that major, do they? Australis has 2 of those majors. And if Australis wins this one, they go 3 majors in a row. And for some of their core, 4 majors won. Obviously, the most in history is 3, so they would break records in numerous respects. You also feel like if Australis can beat Team Liquid here, why can't they win the tournament? And they haven't shown the form up until this point to do it, because as I often point out, not only has Australis made no finals since coming back from their little break, they also, the best, highest ranked team they have beaten in a best of 3 series is NIP. Now, they've had some good games. They had a good game against NRG at one point in time on one map. They had a nice game against Crazy at one point in time. It doesn't matter. Like, they aren't getting the big high-ranked wins. Like, yeah, they beat Crazy. Oh, brilliant sound. Like, is that going to make you win a major? So at the moment, I actually haven't seen the metrics to say that Australis should win. But you know what? Team Liquid looked ropey as fuck early on in this tournament. They didn't look like the Team Liquid that was absolutely dominant in the summer and had absurd stats, like only lost 9 out of 55 maps, won like 23 best of X series in a row, whatever the fuck it is. So here's the form. You look overall, Device has been good, but not the monster he was when they came back in the summer. Magus has been good, but not the superstar that at the end of last year people will call him one of the best players. Dupree has been underwhelming, and I think that has cost them some of their T-sides, particularly on maps. I would even say their beloved Inferno, but especially their Nuke. I think that's one that's really cost them. Zipnix has been so-so, but he wins the odd clutch, not as many as he used to. And Glaive, quite frankly, has been crap as an individual player. As a tactician, still seems one of the best. Individually, hasn't been good so far. You go on the Team Liquid side. Listen, talk all the shit you want. They definitely have the edge, firepower and man for man. Twists has been good, close to star level, not quite the superstar like MVP level he can sometimes have, but he's a streaky player. Naf has been good, he's what you want from him, and he has the all-round game. Elige is still very sick and is on course to win the MVP of this tournament. He's one of the only monsters from the summer that came in that same form at this tournament and continued on, carries the team, the best player in the server when they play in this match. Stewie's had his rare bad tournament, but he's there less for the fragging and more for what he brings in terms of the entry role and filling in some of the holes. The guy who's really dropped off from the summit is Nitro. Nitro has been crap at this tournament. He hasn't been the guy who would sometimes big frag, have the odd mappy take over, go nuts up and win all the clutch. Nah, there hasn't been a whole lot of that this tournament, quite frankly. So there are some holes in Team Liquid. Then you go look at the map pool. So for Australis, their only map that's remained strong is Inferno, basically. They won 7 out of their last 8 on that. They won their last 3. Some of those teams aren't that good. One of the losses is to Team Liquid. Okay. Overpass is actually a decent enough map again for them. Lost to Vitality. No big deal there. They beat Team Liquid on it, though. That's a big time deal. Nuke's in the middle. Remember that stronghold of Nuke, the 31-0 map. They've lost 3 of their last 6 on that one. And one of those losses was to NRG in the very unconvincing fashion when they got smashed like, 16-4 or something crazy. So there's a big struggle. They've been playing Vertigo when they needed to. Their only losses to Team Liquid, so that's probably a little one they've got in their back pocket, except they're playing Team Liquid. So against other squads, that could be interesting. Right now, not as much. Dust 2, one that they used to be monsters on in their era. They've lost 2 of their last 3. Admittedly, one of those Vitality, one of the best teams on Dust 2, and one was Crazy, who just fragged out in a ridiculous overtime game. So I don't necessarily hate on them too much for that, but Dust 2 is not a strong map for them. Train hasn't been very good for them. They've been able to beat Fnatic on it, but they've lost twice to different NRG lineups. In overtime, obviously, to this NRG lineup. And then Mirage, they've only played once in the last few months, and they lost it to Furia. And that really shows you where their Mirage are. Obviously, that was always like a middling map in the past anyway, but when it got weaker was when they were beatable. So when you go through, you look at Team Liquid's side, as I've already alluded to before, when you win, 46 out of 55 maps, 84% or something, you are fucking unbelievable in your map pool. So this is going to sound ridiculous. So Overpass, they've won 10 out of 13, 6 of their last 7, and some of the losses were to teams like Avangar, who actually play that fucking map, Navi. Then on Mirage, not only are they 10 out of their last 10, they're on a 13-game winning streak. That is actually better, I think, than when Virtus Pro was on, I think it was like a 12-game winning streak they had on Nuke or something. So that is bonkers stuff. That's one of the all-time great streaks. But it's crept up because it's not actually stylistically the biggest strength of Team Liquid. Like, I'd put like Overpass, Inferno, DOS 2, I'd put these maps ahead of Mirage, but it just shows how they're not the ones picking it. But when people make them play it, this team doesn't lose many maps, especially not in the summer in their insane form and with this level of fragging. So they've just quietly racked up one of the craziest Mirage streaks of all time. So really dangerous team on that. And obviously that's a map that Australis not really playing, so probably not going to get to play it in this series. Inferno, they're 9 out of their last 10. They've won 9 in a row, beating tons of good teams, including Australis. So very dangerous on Inferno, arguably their go-to pick. I think Inferno and Overpass, you could argue, they're the best teams in the world. Nuke, they're amazingly 6-1. Like, there's not a map you think of very much. They've won their last 5, including beating the likes of NRG and ENCE. These are teams that play the map. This is pretty legit stuff. One of their losses was to G2, who also plays the map, has Kenny S, one of the best Nuke AWPers. So you can see how legit this map was. Then you get the DOS 2, which I actually think stylistically is one of the absolute best maps. I think they are the best team on it. They've lost 4 times out of the last 11. So that's a decent amount of losses, right? They've won 3 out of their last 4 on the map. And you look at who they've lost to. They've lost to North. They play a bit. They've lost to Vitality, arguably the second best DOS 2 team. They've lost to G2, a map that team that goes into it all the time. They've lost to NRG, big fragging team. You know, these are actually very forgivable losses. Then on Vertigo, a map that's right near the bottom of their pool, they've won all 5 times they've played it. Sure, they haven't been able to play that many good teams. They played Australis and Renegades. The other ones aren't really worth mentioning, but they still won them all. And they do not play Train. It's just not a map they ever play. So if you go into the bans here, assuming Australis is the number 1 seed in the tournament, Australis bans first, I'm going to say Australis bans Mirage. Right? That's because Australis has banned Mirage 7 of the last 10 times, and I've just told you Team Liquid's on a 13-game winning streak. So logically, you just get it straight out of the way. You don't even worry about it. Then Team Liquid, I think, bans Train, not because it's a great map for the guys from Australis at the moment, but because Team Liquid has banned Train, it's their perma-ban, and let me just go ahead and tell you, it's 22 out of the last 22 times in Best of 3 series in the last 3 or 4 months, because that's how many fucking Best of 3 series this team's played. Remember, they've won like 23 in a row or something mental. So I think they just get Train out of there as well. I don't really see them flexing on that one. Why bother if you don't play the map? Then Australis, they have their choices here. They're classic choices, they're old home strengths, they still think they're good. Inferno or Nuke, right? Right, if you look at the moment, it has to be Inferno, right? It's still a very, very strong team for Team Liquid. I think Team Liquid is better on it, but it's your strongest map. You won 7 out of 8 if you're Australis. You've got to believe in that, right? So here's the interesting thing. Even though Team Liquid has a way better win rate overall, has played it more and beaten more big teams, I will say, in the pressure of a major, in a best of 3 series, against Australis particularly, I actually think this is way more of a 50-50. So I could certainly see Team Liquid winning it. Take that angle if you want for them to be 2-0. I could also see Australis getting this and pushing us to the 3rd map though. So on that one, if I had to pick, I actually might say I think stylistically Australis should win that one, even though I think overall, this will sound bizarre, Team Liquid is a better Inferno team because they win more on it because they're better fraggers. So stylistically, I think it just suits Australis a little bit better overall. And then again, Australis being a bit ropey overall, right? Then I think Team Liquid, I think it's easy. Team Liquid, you look at the Australis guys, they haven't actually loved Overpass for well over a year now. The guys from Team Liquid have picked it 12 out of the last, 20-something times. It's the most picked map. It's also a map they picked against Australis when they've had a chance. So I think logically you should pick it here because I think Team Liquid would win. I don't think it's that good a map for the guys from Australis at the moment. They don't seem to be putting that much effort into it overall. And if I just go over here and quickly have a look, it's a map that even they sometimes second rotation ban. So if I'm Team Liquid, go ahead and pick it. You probably win that. Now, I personally think you could already have won the series 2-0, but I said I'll edge the first map, Inferno, potentially to Australis in some epic win. So then we go to the next rotation. Australis should ban DOS 2 here. They, interestingly, do mix up their second bans, but if you look at how, even though the win rate isn't so crazy, I don't think Australis wants the decider personally to be on DOS 2, and they probably ban it here. Choice to ban Vertigo as well, to be fair. I think Team Liquid at this point in time should ban Nuke, actually. You could get cocky after the NRG series and play it, but historically, why do you want to play them on Nuke? I know it'd be a great way to send them home, but just play them on fucking Vertigo, because if we want to make it a DM, if we want to make it who's got the most recent Vertigo strats, if I'm Team Liquid, I don't mind playing that game at all. I don't mind putting a lot of pressure on you to be able to get shit going. I don't mind putting a lot of pressure on fucking Dupree, quite frankly. So I think Team Liquid, if it's the Vertigo one, yeah, Vertigo's not as clear-cut for anyone, but I think Team Liquid wins that as well. I have Team Liquid win this series 2-1 or 2-0. Now, for the first semi-final, ENCE versus Vitality is who I have meeting at this point in time. Obviously, they were the number 2 and number 3 teams, still are on my rankings. They've obviously met loads of times. Vitality put ENCE out of ESL 1 Cologne in last place. Vitality has won more tournaments in thanks due to being the kryptonite to the guys from ENCE. And, Interestingly enough, they played a best of 3 in this tournament, and Ents struck back. Ents crushed them 2-0. Ents actually made Vitality look shit in that one particular match, so makes it certainly a spicy rivalry. Obviously, on this side of the bracket, both teams are the ones expected to potentially go to the final. Ents would be going to their second major final. Vitality's never been in a major final. They've never even been in a major top 8. But they're the second best team in the world in the rankings, so if they get an open bracket without the Australises and Team Liquids, they're supposed to go to the finals. So, very interesting matchup here. Stylistically, I think, again, you've got to give the slight, I would actually say slight fragging edge to Ents overall, but I would say, obviously, Ziwu is the best player by far in the server, but then again, he hasn't been in major playoffs before, maybe he doesn't turn up in that form. That's certainly something I'm thinking about going forward. Then again, Sergey, the best player for Ents, wasn't as good in the past, so I think some of the fragging elements will be a little bit more of a wash in this one overall. I think stylistically at the moment, despite the form of Ents, I like Vitality a little bit more, even though Ents definitely is more effective and efficient as a team. Then you go and you look at the map pools. Right, the reason why this is a great setup is these are pretty different map pools, quite frankly, in terms of where the maps are. So as a result, there should be more one-sided elements. And that's why when you get into the map pick ban, it gets very interesting, because I'm assuming Ents is the highest seed. I'm assuming Ents bans Vertigo because they always ban Vertigo. It's also a map that, even though Vitality only played once and beat Mouse on, you just don't want to waste your time playing it, and Ents don't play it anyway. So on the Vitality side of things, I think logically you ban your most banned map, which is Train, because that's the best map historically of Ents, stylistically of Ents. So you get the bans out of the way, now we get to some interesting picks. Ents actually, I think at this point in time, logically just picks Nuke. It's not really like a super strong map for the Vitality guys, it's more in the middle, whereas it always has stylistically and map win rate wise being a good map for the Ents guys. I actually think Ents will win this one if they pick it, despite all the things with Alexi B. I think they've got the quality to win this one. Not impossible Vitality can win, they're just not a favourite whatsoever on it. So Ents wins that map if it's Nuke. Vitality, I think, actually picks Dust 2. It's obviously a classic map they love to pick. I think Ents is a bit overrated on that map, and themselves overrate themselves in terms of thinking where they're at. Like, yeah, last year at ESL Cologne they were good on that map. That was a long fucking time ago now, boys. So I think Vitality, listen, it's always dangerous to pick Dust 2, especially if the other team might win their map. So you've got a chance to get 2-0 here, but I think Vitality should win this one. I think overall they are favoured on Dust 2. I'm still going to give it to the team that's the better team. So we get 3 maps, I think, in this one. Ents, I think, should ban Inferno. It's a solid enough map for Vitality, but more importantly, it's not that great a map overall for the Ents guys. And most importantly, it's a map that they second round rotation ban the most. So just get it out the equation. Now, Vitality then would be left between Vertigo and Overpass. They don't want to play fucking Vertigo. Why would they? Oh, no, wait a second. It would be Vertigo at that point in time. What would they have left to ban? Let me think. What have I forgotten here? Mirage and Overpass. Yes, Mirage and Overpass would be the ones that would be like, oh, that's what we're going on. So I think logically at this point in time, even though I think Ents is a good Overpass team, if you're Vitality, if you don't have confidence in your Overpass, what the fuck's going on? So I think technically you should ban Mirage and you should let Overpass be the decider. I think you will win it. Even though they've had some streaky results recently, I think that's one of the maps where stylistically Ents is good on it. It's not a map they get to play as much. I think actually I'll slightly edge this one. I think this should be a very close series, by the way. I think I edged this one to Vitality 2-1. I have an all North American semi-final at a major because I'm taking NRG slightly to overtake Navi, and then I'm taking Team Liquid to beat Australis. So this already would be monumental, the idea that these two teams would play for a spot in the final and definitely will have an NA team in the final no matter what. I also think stylistically they're two of the strongest individual lineups in the world, and since Team Liquid's lineup hasn't come in peak form all across the board, there are chances for NRG to match up and potentially outfrag them as well. Obviously this would be an insane accomplishment for the likes of Stan and Cirque and Breezy, etc. The guys from Team Liquid are supposed to win this one and go to the final and then win the whole major itself. But I have to say, you look interestingly enough, map pool's also quite different actually. Team Liquid doesn't play Train. It's one of the best maps for NRG. Team Liquid has great win rates on loads of maps, but stylistically, someone like NRG can match up with them on the likes of Nuke, Inferno. So I think as we go into this series, here's where it gets fun. The bans should be fairly obvious. Team Liquid should ban Train. They always ban Train. It's one of the best maps for NRG. NRG should ban Vertigo. It's one of their most banned maps. And also, it's a map that Team Liquid's won every single time they've played it on. I don't think you want to waste your time on that. Team Liquid should ban, in my opinion, should pick rather. It's either going to be Overpass or Inferno. If they pick Overpass, which I think is the right one, it's an underrated map for the NRG guys, maybe. But a lot of that was from the past core. I think if you're Team Liquid, you've got to have confidence in that. Like, I know you've lost the odd game here and there. you are still a very strong team. You still won 6 of your last 7 on Overpass. Also, I don't know what's happening in the Australis series at this point in time, where I would assume you've won again, so you'd be 7 out of 8. You've got to go with your strengths when you hit the playoffs, mate. There's not some like super punish pick. Like, I don't think Inferno's a big punish pick against NRG, even though I think stylistically it does take away some of the weapons like Cirque to some degree. But I would say you pick Inferno Overpass here, and I think Team Liquid should win this one overall. NRG, I actually think, should pick Nuke. I think that is the logical pick. You had a great performance on it against Australis. You're coming in, there's not that much data to go off in terms of the other teams because you've been playing lesser teams on the map. You'd have to go back to when you looked at a very different team with a brand new Stanislaw in the lineup. You've won your last 3 on it. It's one that, listen, it's always been a good map. Like Team Liquid's won the last 5 on it, and some against good teams. But you've got to go somewhere in their map pool. And since you have some that are differing on the either sides of the map, you've got to go into a middle map, unfortunately. So I would say you pick that. And you know what? I think this could be a great map, but I think Team Liquid will edge this one on Nuke. I think that's also a map they can get it on as well. I think they'll win their map first, so they'll have a big advantage. So psychologically, that is. So I think Team Liquid's going to win every map in this series. There's the spoiler for you boys. Second rotation. I think Team Liquid bans Mirage. I think NR, I mean, it's just a map that's like one that they typically tend. I know they've won the last 30, it sounds mental, right? But listen, you go back and you look at the records, I'll tell you the stat right now. Even though they've won the last 13, it's also one of the maps that once Nuke's out of the equation is their second most banned in the second rotation. Team Liquid changes up their second ban a lot depending on who the opponent is and what their strengths are. So actually I think in this scenario, they would ban Mirage because then that leaves Inferno and Dust 2 as the choice for NRG. Now listen, those are 2 of my best maps for Team Liquid. So you can pick your poison there. You can have your Sophie's Choice NRG. Which one would you like me to play? So I think NRG personally bans Inferno. Just logically, you want to play Dust 2. It's obviously a banging map. You've already beat Team Liquid on it. Let's run it back if we get to a third map. I don't think we will, but if we do, let's run it all back and see who wins in a true NA scrim fest. Frag them out, shoot them in the head with deagles and AKs. Style Dust 2 game, which quite frankly, Team Liquid on paper should win. So I take Team Liquid to win this series 2-0. If it goes to 3, it's going to be 2-1. Due primarily to the brackets and Ensign Vitality ending up on one side and all the murderers being on the bottom side with Team Liquid, if Team Liquid escapes from that, I actually expect it to be number 1 in the world, Team Liquid, versus number 2 in the world, Vitality, in the grand final. It's going to be that, I think, or Team Liquid versus Ents. So, obviously, a matchup we've seen a lot. Obviously, it's a matchup that Vitality initially got the better of and won all the maps. And then Team Liquid's been banging on them ever since. Sometimes in very good fashion, sometimes in just good fashion. So, I think, listen, stylistically, I think it's a matchup that favours Team Liquid. They've got so many fraggers. Map pool-wise, Team Liquid has the better map pool. Individual players goes without saying. I think in terms of like the best player, listen, Zebu overall is the better player, but OllieJ's playing amazing at this tournament, has a lot more pedigree in majors, and it's not that far behind him in terms of the overall world rankings for my money. So I think a lot of the aspects edge over to Team Liquid's side, not a lot on the Vitality side, quite frankly, including all the recent times they've played. So if we want to jump right into the pick ban here, there's a lot more on Vitality's shoulders to what they need to do here than Team Liquid. Team Liquid should ban Train, they always do. I think Vitality, since they're a Train ban team as well, I think they've got to pick. We either ban Inferno, where we have been a little bit ropey and Team Liquid's very good, or we ban Mirage, where Team Liquid's won 13 times, even though it's actually one of our best maps. We won 10 out of the last 10 out of 11, but the loss was to Team Liquid. So I think they probably ban Inferno personally, and it's just the logical one if you look what they often ban. Team Liquid probably should pick Overpass. It's at least a map that the guys from Vitality have been losing on somewhat. I think Team Liquid would slightly edge that. I actually think, by the way, again, spoiler, Team Liquid wins every map here. Vitality should pick Dust 2. It's a good chance to win against them. It's a map that you love. It's one of the only maps available still. Obviously, there's not that much else you're going to really want to go into anyway at this point in time. Maybe you can do a crazy Nuke pick or something. I don't see a universe in which you're going to pick Vertigo, but if you've got the balls to do it, fair play to you. If you want to throw it up, if you've lost them that many times, you want to change it up, go for it. I think you just pick Dust 2 and you say, fuck it, we like Dust 2 and Overpass, you like Dust 2 and Overpass, let's just play and see who wins on it. I think Team Liquid would overall edge that game, but listen, it's Dust 2, so absolutely Vitality could win. Then you go, Team Liquid should ban Nuke, which would leave Vitality with Vertigo or Mirage. Logically, they don't want to play Vertigo. It's a monster map for the guys from Team Liquid. Team Liquid want to be cunts. They can also just literally pick Vertigo as their map. I just personally, I don't know if you want to do that. I think you probably go into comfort when you're in the major finals. So I think actually that the guys from Vitality let Mirage be the decider, a map that they certainly play, have a good win rate on. So we end up playing 3 maps that both teams somewhat like. And I think Team Liquid should edge that one as well, even though I've said they have some stylistic issues, but they also have won 13 times in a row, even if the players so far in the tournament haven't shown that individual form. So I have Team Liquid winning the major. ascending to the true god tier status, solidifying any doubts about their major, and being the team of 2019. Right, as promised, I'm going to give away one ticket. I'm also going to have a ticket I'm going to give away on my Instagram as well. But this ticket's going to be for people who watch this video. And what you're going to do is, let me think, how would you do that? I think what we'll do is this. You're going to say your Twitter name. If you don't have Twitter, tough shit, I'm afraid. You're going to say your Twitter name in the YouTube comments. And what you're going to do is just tell me who you predict will make for the best matchup in the tournament. So of the quarterfinal matches, just tell me who the best matchup's going to be. I'll look through the comments. I'll pick whatever the best answer is. It doesn't have to be the one I actually agree with. Just I think it's a good answer. I'll add you on Twitter. I'll DM you and I'll send you the ticket and you can come along and see from the Mercedes-Benz Arena with the rest of us. This video was kindly supported by Patrick Ribeiro, Penguin Off 9, Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Fat Guy got 24 ADR in an online qualifier, Lee Chaolan, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, JDubs, Chi Mao, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, Kolja G, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Obviously, I have quite a varied output. Do you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA? Maybe you want teasers, see who the guests are on my next shows. Do you want to take part in a donator discussion with me about esports? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scrilluminati today. In the description box below, there's a Patreon link.